The time has finally come. It's been about a month-ish, but the first episode of KyngPin Recreations is here. It's gonna be the same intro. I didn't decide if I was gonna make a new one yet, but just ignore that, it's not important. This month I have tasked you all with submitting your own anime protagonist design from either an existing anime or one you've made up. And I've chosen a few that I'm going to redraw while reading what you wrote about them. So without further ado, let's create some chaos! I often forget that I can use my laptop as a tablet, so we're going to try something different for the script here. Let's see how it goes. But first up, we've got a submission from Glitchy Yoshi from the Discord, and they wrote, I decided to stretch the rules a bit for the community redraw, anime protagonist, and use my old persona. New identity these days, changed into a man, and added inspiration to Pikachu. He's supposed to be a husky toon, but since this is inspired by an electric rat, maybe make this more of a chinchilla. Basically, a chinchilla with toon force, akin to Go-Go Dodo, and a mallet tail. Now, I will admit, going into the community redraw, one of the things I figured would be the toughest would be choosing. And oh boy, was it so hard. You all did. Everyone who submitted just gave such great designs and stories that it was so hard to choose. But this particular submission stuck out to me because I've always been a cartoon person. I don't know if you can tell it from my art style or what I've worked with, what I write and stuff like that, but I've always gravitated more towards cartoons rather than live action stuff. In my childhood, a little more of a mixed bag nowadays, but all the physics of cartoons like really drew me in and always got me thinking about like, what if you had stuff like that in real life? Like if you could have Looney Tune based powers as a superpower, how cool would that be? Because the possibilities are endless. And that's very close to what Glitchy Yoshi sent in. Essentially, Toon Force is another name for the cartoon physics superpower ability kind of thing. And so this is basically a chinchilla-ish character with cartoon physics. And that was all very good. And then the kicker, the one that really made me go with this one I have to do, was the mallet tail. I thought that was really interesting because initially in the design, I thought it was just the character holding a mallet. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like most cartoon characters like Spider-Ham have the mallet, and you know, it's just a wooden mallet is a staple of cartoons. But then I saw it was the character's tail, and I'm like, that's really clever. And especially like the way you could swing it is really cool. So that's what made me decide from contender to finalist, and I really like that one. Although I'm not too sure, I use the same colors as the reference, but I feel like I should have made the mallet gray to convey that it's part of the body. Like it's a natural part of this character's anatomy rather than an addition to the overalls he's wearing. But either way, I still think it came out really good. And for this one, other than the pose, I tried to go a little bit more cartoony in my construction and line art. Rather than making bumps for the muscles and roughing in like anatomically correct parts of the body, I went a lot more rubber hose with this, basically making the arms one curving cylinder instead of like the forearm, the bicep, and all that kind of stuff. The legs are a little bit less that, only because of the folds of the overalls, which in a bit more rubber hose probably wouldn't be as many as I drew. But overall, I really like this. Even like the whole rendering thing and the different eye shapes really stuck out to me because it's not human. I've only really drawn humans and monsters on this channel, and all the humans roughly have the same eye shape. So drawing a humanoid-esque thing and getting to experiment with larger sized eyes and of eyes of different shapes really made it cool. They didn't provide a name, but without further ado, let's take a look at Glitchy Yoshi's submission. Our next submission comes from ComicFan13, also from the Discord, who writes, Solace, real name Adam Andrews, is one of the handful of superheroes in one of the biggest cities in the world. His childhood memories are a bit fuzzy, but from what he remembers, he's the last son of a destroyed planet who was adopted by a loving family who taught him about responsibility. After they were brutally gunned down in an alleyway, Adam pledged to bring justice to the city and avenge his adopted parents' death. This became increasingly easy after he was bitten by a radioactive lightning bug that gave him the power to fly and shoot electricity from his hands. One day, while fighting a powerful supervillain, he took a nasty hit, launching him through multiple buildings of a chemical facility. Before he could react, acidic chemicals doused him and his uniform, burning through half of it and his skin to reveal what was hidden underneath. He was an android. As he tried comprehending what he was looking at, he noticed a set of code numbers on his arm. H1RO. At that moment, the memories came flooding back to him. Adam was no alien, and he had no adopted family. Adam was built in a lab by a brilliant but corrupt engine. The mob had tasked the genius to build several machines that could play the roles of heroes and villains to keep the authorities and medias off their trail. With a flashy show of destruction and violence, the mob could continue their business uninterrupted. This realization shattered Solace. For all his life, he had been fighting to uphold truth and justice, to live up to his parents' example of what it means to be a hero. But it was all a lie. He was built to assist criminals in some grand conspiracy. The machine thought hard for a minute before coming to a conclusion. His origin may be fictional, probably just some half-baked origin stories his designer programmed in to fill in any questions he may have about why he fights, but it still meant something to him. If he was programmed to play the role of the hero, then he would play it to the letter, and bring down the corrupt men who built him, and hopefully, along the way, convince his siblings, for lack of a better word, to come around. Sorry if I couldn't recreate the anime art style all that well, but hopefully the design itself is decent. Imagine if it would be something similar to the style of My Hero Academia or of the Batman animes. And while admittedly I didn't try to replicate the My Hero Academia style, just because that's not my style that I usually work in, but I still really like that idea and can definitely see this character working in one of those two universes. Maybe a little bit more DC than My Hero Academia, but still really fun. With a lot of the poses of this community redraw, I tried really hard to push the poses past what I normally do. Really challenge myself to do more dynamic three-dimensional poses. So with this one and a few others you'll see, I did this thing where I tried practicing foreshortening, where one arm is all the way out in front and the other one is toward the back. And I think it turned out really good. The front arm I really like, especially since I used the more detailed arm, the robot one, as the front arm rather than the covered arm with the suit, which would have been a lot easier. And admittedly, I think I made the back arm a little too small. It does look a little wonky, but overall, I really like it. The lightning effects in this one I also really love. I worked with these little arced lightnings before. First one that comes to mind is the director as a supervillain from Nimona, and that was a good first step. I can't remember if I'd done it more recently, but this one I really like. I took inspiration from Popcross Studios with how he does his lightning things, where it's like arced shapes with an outer glow and then a smaller white one in the middle. Granted, that might not be the step for step, but you get the idea. And the lightning also lended itself to be the main light source of this piece, which I really love. I love when the light source is in the piece. Like, you can see where the main source of light is coming from, and doing it as this lightning allowed me to really push those shadows like I've been doing recently and really make the back half of the character much darker than the front half, and it looks so good. Also, story-wise, this was really cool. Being a superhero, being built as a robot as a cover-up for a crime family, and using multiple robots as this ongoing hero and villain war, that was just such a cool idea when I read it. Like, I've never seen anything like that before. Like, making of heroes that ignore your crimes, but also go and fight the other fictional crimes that you also created. It's just so much fun. And here we have Solace. Our next submission is an email one that comes from Galahound19, who has been a longtime commenter of the channel and the idea behind one, if not a couple of video ideas. But they submitted Mina the Shadow Warrior, and their entry reads as follows. Mina had a really rough start in life. Her earliest memories were being forced to listen to hateful words from people, even members of her own family, saying that her existence is a contradiction. Being a disgraced lord's illegitimate daughter was one thing, but to also be a human-gobliness hybrid was something else entirely. Everyone knows that a gobliness seduced the young Lord Starling and bared his child, tainting the noble Starling bloodline, the same noble family that had slain the dreaded Demon King and banished him and his subjects from all realms of humanity, including every elf, troll, and goblin. Mina had grown up in a high-class society that looks down and scowls at people like her. She was marked for her pointy ears and the purple patches on her skin, and her father did very little to help, other than insist that Mina cover up her non-human traits and warned her to stay out of trouble. This was mostly to protect his already fractured image. Mina wouldn't be living with the royal family if it wasn't for her uncle, King Tobias. He was slowly implementing improvements with the intention of repatriating his banished subjects, but was struggling to get the proclamation through the Court of Lords. On Mina's 12th birthday, her cousin goaded her into a duel. The boy was twice her size, and yet Mina defeated him with ease. Seeing this, the king had an idea. He made Mina a squire, to train as a knight to represent the goblins and other mystical races. In her first year, she was top of her class, and in her last year, she had slain the orc captain who had been terrorizing the local coast. Mina was the best knight the kingdom ever had, and they were going to make it official by giving her the White Saber, the magical sword that once slayed the Demon King. This was the pinnacle moment for Mina, and a moment of change for the kingdom. At least it would have been, if it wasn't for that faithful day. Unknown to the rest of the kingdom, certain members within the Court of Lords were disgusted with King Tobias' ever-growing proclamations. So much so that they conspired to have the kind-hearted king assassinated and pinned the whole thing on Mina. Mina, unable to prove her innocence, fled from the knights, leaving behind the White Saber, her knighthood, her home, and with no other choice but to hide away in the ruins of the Demon King's stronghold. Whilst there, she found something she didn't know she needed. It was the whip sword known as Sapphire's Vengeance, a magical weapon once wielded by the Demon King himself. Finding this most hated relic, she realized she had to fight for her beliefs in order to be a hero, just not in the way she imagined. She had to pose as a villainess until she can gather enough evidence to expose the corrupt lords. Mina set about disrupting the supply chains to the kingdom and redistributed the goods to human, elves, trolls, and goblins alike. Mina fights with her gobliness traits, her ears, legs, and stomach exposed, proudly showing off what makes her different. Everyone would know her as Mina, the Shadow Warrior. Can't wait for the community redraw, it's going to be great. This one was super fun to do. I mean, they all were, but like this one, I really loved, despite it being a little bit of a challenge, because I love a whip sword as a weapon. Bit hard to draw all the little segments though, but I really think it turned out nice. And just the story overall, I really liked. It's very Nimona inspired, with the whole someone wanting a better life for those who may be less represented, and then things just going horribly wrong before it could be implemented. And I really like the fact that Galahound19 called out in the story that Mina is purposely exposing her ears and stomach and legs and all the gobliness parts of her, because that's who she is. That's part of her identity, and that's really cool. As you can see again with this one, it's another one that I did with the pose arms out front, and I'm getting better at foreshortening. It's a little weird to be like, okay, what part of the body would this hand cover up if it was going this way? Would it be in front of the face, or would it be more lower to the chest? And for this one, since there is a armband on only the forearm, it comes the fact of, okay, when would this cut off? Like, where would the forearm end? So the sleeve would end, and it would go into the bicep and the shoulder and stuff like that. Those I still need a little bit more time to figure out, but they are definitely getting there. And also, again, you can notice that the legs are doing this weird one outstretched and the other bent behind it. And I'll be honest, like, when I imagine a pose in my head of like, okay, I want this character to be doing this, I can really clearly see the top half, like the main thing, the head, the body, and the arm. But then when it gets to the second arm and the legs, things just kind of get blurry. Like, I'm like, okay, I know they're there, but I can't exactly picture what they would be doing. And so I went with this kind of like jumping back. So the first one, Comic Fan 13's one, Solace, was more jumping forward and launching lightning. This one is more of a jumping back to whip the sword at an assailant, which I really like. It's a good pose, don't get me wrong. I noticed that I often draw legs in the same pose every single time I do a dynamic pose. So definitely need to work on that. But overall, I'm really happy with this. Thank you, Galahound, for the submission. Let's take a look. Last but not least, we have Taste of Ink submission from the Discord again. And it reads, "This is Valel," I hope I'm saying that right, "Angel of the Arts. Despite having dark wings, he is not fallen. He was just born with a deformity. That's why his wings still glow. He's the patron angel of dancers, singers, and artists in general. He uses ballet as a fighting style and can use his hands as a spray can in any color, though he can only use one color at a time. He's the protagonist of a universe where the arts are under attack by the government, and it's his responsibility to see humanity through this art crisis." Design notes. His hair is very curly. I don't think I communicated very well just how curly it is. Also, when he flies, fights, or uses his spray can hands, his eyes glow like light shining off a solid gold. He stands at 5'9" and is particularly lithe. He is hundreds of years old and can appear as any age, but usually chooses to appear as a young adult. Both drawings are of him. The one in the ballet tutu is from his pure angel form. The one with the tattoos is the form he takes on Earth. Now, this is where the hardest part of this one came in. I did not know which version of this character to go with, because they were both very, very good. But the deciding factor was I wanted him to be in a sort of ballet pose as the dynamic pose. So after looking through a few references for ballet poses, I came up with the one on screen, and one that I'm really happy with. Like, this is by far my favorite pose of the entire thing. Although I really like how the rest of them turned out, because it really pushed my understanding of posing. But this one just came out so good. Now, on the other hand, something I don't quite love is the graffiti hands. Not only did I use an arm pose similar to Sleepy Kitty, I believe, or whatever I named the catnap mech in my Poppy Playtime Chaos episode, but the graffiti itself is a little too mystical and smoky, in my opinion. It's very similar to how I rendered the smoke coming out of SCP-C-1235, the Fruit Loops one, and I just feel like graffiti would be a lot less dense. Like, graffiti is supposed to be like a spray paint, but this one feels like it is a gas that is being dispersed throughout an area to inflict some large form effect on people, rather than to, air quotes for lack of a better word, stain a wall or something. So if I had to redo something, I would definitely go back and retry the smoke. One thing I also think I missed that Taste of Ink mentioned is the curly hair of this character. I tried to do what I thought would read as curly, but it did not really work. There's a few areas where it reads a bit like the 2 strands hanging off the side of his face. Those read as curly. The rest of the hair, the whole back part, take it or leave it. It's a lot more wavy than it is curly, and I apologize for that. I did my best, but curly hair is something I don't think I've ever drawn, actually. So I need to experiment with methods of doing that. And my final note is that the way I drew, like just in the upper part, the colors I wound up using, which were similar to the colors in the drawing, I try to avoid color picking just to get a better understanding of color theory. But it came out, at least the top area, like I said, came out looking a little Starfire-esque from the old, like from Teen Titans, the cartoon, which I don't mind because I love Starfire. The design is awesome. And I hope you enjoy this. And I hope I did everyone justice by doing their designs. Let's take a look at our final drawing of the episode. And there we have it, the first episode of KyngPin Recreations. I'm absolutely blown away by what everyone submitted. The stories and the ideas and the designs were just so good. So thank you so much to everyone who did submit. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them. But a special thank you to those who did end up getting picked. Glitchy Yoshi, Comic Fan 13, Galahound 19, and Taste of Ink. I'll be sending you all a copy of what I've redrawn here today. And now it's time for the next month's prompt. For the month of March, I want all of you to design your own SCPs. Please provide any lore or abilities and any other details you think would help, as well as 1 headshot and 1 full body shot. I will admit this will also be a straight redraw, but this time the video is going to be narrated by our SCP narrator, Professor Marcus Plague. I don't even know if I did that voice right. But thank you all once again for watching the video. If you liked it, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you all in the next video/live stream. Take care, everyone.